get greedy with like knowing yourself and like spending time with yourself, especially like when you're an athlete, because when you leave the sport that you dedicate your entire life to and you're detached from that thing, you'll figure out who you are. And it has to be something so much more than the person you are in your sport.
I just wrote that down. Get greedy.
I did too. So did I literally wrote that down.
I'm Maddie.
I'm Azhani.
It girls. Maddie Berezowitz Azhani Tealer.
I'm Lit Girl. Podcast with a couple it girls.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm Lit Girl. Podcast with a couple it girls. Lit Girl.
What's up, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the It Girls, hosted by Mercury. And we are so excited to have a new guest, someone that's already super near and dear to my heart, and I don't even know her that well yet. Miss Anna Wilson. Anna, what's up?
What's up, you guys? I'm super excited to be here. Really grateful for the opportunity to talk to you guys, and I'm just really excited to see where this conversation goes.
That's awesome.
She thinks she's pumped. Like, I was just telling her before the episode that Z and I have been talking about this for like, since we got you on, we've been like, she's going to be so good. Especially when we were texting, I'm like, she's texting me all this stuff. Like, it's going to be amazing. But Anna is our, what number national champion, Z?
Dude, we've had like 4 national champions on. You might be number 4, I think.
Yeah. Number, but like just as significant, especially women's basketball too, as women's basketball continues to get so much better. I don't know. I'm just excited. I'm excited to see where women's basketball specifically is going to go in the next few years.
Yeah, it's going to be massive. I can tell you that. The trajectory of it is insane. It's unpredictable. And women's basketball is something that everyone should buy into right now with the climate of the players and the caliber and everything like that. It's going to be amazing.
I know you said that you spoke at the White House about NCAA women's basketball. Talk us through that a little bit. Like, what did that look like? What were kind of some major talking points you had in that conversation?
Yeah, so how that all kind of came about. So I was playing in the NCAA tournament the year before. So this is before my 6th year. So in 2021, and this was my 5th year. We had gone to the national championship. All this stuff was kind of going on with the NCAA, like all that stuff you saw with Sedona Prince and everything, like all the videos, all the pictures. One of my strength and conditioning coaches came out with a video and a little statement as well about like the weight room and everything, because we had like 25-pound weights and stuff like that, which is crazy, and like yoga mats and stuff. And then you see the guys tournament and it's like this complete like contrast, stark contrast and everything. And so, Tara, we're all kind of upset, but, we're really focused on winning the tournament and everything. And Tara said that she basically said something along the lines of like, people listen to winners, and so like, we win this thing, we have an opportunity, we have a platform to talk about it. If we lose, no one's going to want to, hear what we have to say, and so, we kind of just, focused and narrowed our focus in on winning that national championship. And then kind of the opportunity came up afterwards, where Corey Close is kind of spearheading this whole thing, and she has Dawn Staley, and she has Gina Ariema, and she has obviously Tara VanDerveer, kind of like in this group, this WBCA, and then they have like a bunch of other coaches from like other sports. I think softball was one of the main other sports too, and some of those coaches have been around for a really, really long time. And basically, Tara had me, because obviously we were there from the very beginning of the tournament all the way to the very end. So we kind of got to see the adjustments that they tried to make up until the end of the tournament. And so Tara asked me to talk, probably because I'm one of the oldest people in college basketball at that point. So I'd been there from like the very first like 6 years of, or 5 years of NCAA tournaments, and I've been able to see kind of the changes and kind of how it's gone for over the past few years. And at that point, I was in my second Final Four. And so pretty much Tara kind of came up to me and was like, would you like to talk to the White House? And I would be like, yeah, I'd love to. Obviously, I've had brothers play at the college level too. And so I know kind of the differences that kind of come up and the different opportunities that men get professionally too. And so she basically asked me to talk, and I basically just did a bunch of stuff with Caitlin Clark and some other athletes who were playing at that time in the tournament.
That's so cool. I do want to stop real quick and say, you've touched on so many things I want to ask about, but we don't know anything about you yet. So we need an elevator pitch before we go any deeper. We need to know like where you're from. We need to know everything about you. So you have a minute to give your best elevator pitch, and then I have some questions about that, and I want to get back to that.
All right, I got a minute. So I'm from Richmond, Virginia. I'm from the East Coast. I moved over to the West Coast when I was in 12th grade. Moved to Seattle, Washington, played for Bellevue, won a state championship with Bellevue. I was a gold medalist at USA level. And U17, I committed to Stanford when I was a freshman in high school. One of the first people to do that, which was very, very strange at that time. I originally had like some offers from some schools on the East Coast and one other West Coast school. My brother was playing for the Seattle Seahawks. His name is Russell Wilson. And that's how I got introduced to Stanford from Richard Sherman and Doug Baldwin. And then kind of after that, I have an older brother, Harry Wilson, who lives on the East Coast in Kentucky. He played, baseball and football in college too. So they're all like, go to Stanford, because that's the kind of their dream school. I ended up going to Stanford. My freshman year, we went to Final Four. And then kind of after that, we won a bunch of different tournament championships and everything. My fifth year was my best year of college basketball. Had a lot of growth during that time. I was a captain for 3 years, and then won a national championship in my fifth year. Went to another Final Four in my sixth year. Lost to UConn, unfortunately. Now I was a senior executive at a company called Tombras, and now I've transitioned into a director of vision at this company called Haddad Brand, who makes all the kids' clothing for Nike, Converse, Hurley, Levi's, and Jordan, and of course 3 Brand, which is my brother's brand. So I focus on that brand mostly. I'm a creative by trade. I studied art in college and then did my thesis in digital media. Well, my major basically in my master's was digital media studies, but I wrote my thesis in neutral thinking and created a language analysis system that detected neutrality and how you could be successful in whatever you're doing, whether you're a corporate athlete or an athlete, based off of how neutral you are. So yeah.
That's like that's a pretty good elevator pitch.
Thank you.
Like the elevator of like the West.
The door is closing there. My last few words.
No, that was crazy.
No, that was amazing, Anna. Literally, like, my jaw was on the floor as you were speaking. That was the most nonchalant, like, ginormous flex of an elevator pitch I've ever heard. Like, that was a very impressive, humble elevator pitch. I will say.
Crazy.
Oh, gosh. Where do we even begin, Tealer? Like, I just, you hit it. Get us
All
going.
right, well, so obviously I was doing some digging on you and looking up all these stuffs we could talk about. And one thing that stood out to me that you sent and that I saw on your Wikipedia page, because you do have a Wikipedia page if you didn't know that, you've played the 4th most games in all of NCAA history.
Yeah.
That's like pretty insane. 160 games over 6 years. And so my first thought was like, how did your body hold up like in that time? Like, do you feel burnt out? Do you feel like, so you were talking about beforehand, like you're 7 years older than your teammates. Like, how does that feel? How does that work?
I mean, for me, I feel like at the college level, I got to experience a lot of really, really cool things. I think that's by far my favorite. Like, if I had a personal accolade that I actually like really cared about, it's definitely that one. I remember my freshman year, I was really struggling because I was injured. And so this is how I got my 5th year. I was injured. And like, I love working out, I love being in the gym. And when I was younger, like being in the gym was my escape, So like in a lot of ways, I felt like really detached from, sorry, my screen just like hopped into a different window, but I felt like really detached from like myself, not being able to work out a ton because I was struggling with a concussion. I was out for 8 months with a concussion. I had a really hard time tracking with my eyes. So like one eye would be over here and the other one would be lagging behind.
What?
And so I really struggled with that. And so I think it's my favorite thing because I had to really figure out like how my body works, and I had to figure out how like to listen to myself and like how I'm doing versus like the pressure of like, oh, I want to return, or I want to play. Like, this is what other people are expecting of me. Like, I'm letting people down by not playing, by not starting, by not, all of this stuff. And so it was a lot of like just personal growth during that time. And so being able to play for 160 games, being there while Tara like reached 1,000 wins, and then like also being there like for her to like surpass like Pat Summitt and all those things. I just think that like being able to play in the most games, like fourth most games ever, while struggling with injuries my first 2 seasons, was massive, because the end of my career was a stark contrast to the beginning of my career, where like I was playing like 2 and 3 minutes to where I was playing like 32, 40, not coming out of the game. And so I think that was like, just something for me where, there were games where I didn't play, and I would like after the game, I would get on the bike in the hallway and I'd bike because I wanted to play 30 minutes. So I'd bike for 30 minutes, like to stimulate the fact that like I wanted to play 30 minutes. So I'm going to bike like as if I'm in the game for that long. So I could feel like releasing like that much energy, to kind of get myself in the mindset of like, I'm going to manifest playing for that long. So, I became really, really healthy. I think COVID was a year that really transformed my life, in terms of my like physical health and like taking care of myself, my body, and like realizing what workouts work for me and what workouts don't, and that sort of thing. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Speaking on the conversation of Stanford, I feel like when I think of a Stanford student athlete, I think of someone who kind of like has it all. Sometimes going to sound bad, but sometimes people say that about Kentucky volleyball. Like, well, okay, let me tell the whole story. Like, our friend in the world, he's like, we don't get it. Like, Craig is our coach's name. He's like, how does Craig like recruit players who have it all? Like, they're really good at volleyball, they're like, they do well in school, and they're hot. And he's like, how do they have it all? And seriously, like, when I think of Stanford student athletes, that's what I think of. I'm like, y'all are obviously very intelligent individuals who care about your education too. You guys obviously are competing at the absolute highest level, with Stanford winning the Directors Cup like year after year with all 45 sports that you all have. With that being said, like, and this is going to come off bad, but I'll backtrack it. Something like my coaches often talk to me about is like, you need to show others that you don't have it all. Like, you need to like that perception that others have of you of like, you got this together, get this together. Like, when you build relationships with people, like, they need to see the vulnerable side of you that like, no, like, I do not have it all. Like, this is a mess. This is a mess. This is a mess. So for you, I'm sure people have that perception of you too, like with your family and your social media and your basketball career and you academically. Like, what is your approach to like being like, no, y'all, like, this is how I'm gonna approach with vulnerability, with courage, to show you like I'm more than student and an athlete.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a balance. I think that like concentrating on the things that you don't have, like the weaknesses and stuff. Like, I'm gonna boast about my weaknesses and the fact that like, that's how I relate to someone else. If I have a teammate who's sitting on the bench or something like that, I'm going to relate to them because I've been there before. Like, I'm going to talk about those experiences more than talking about like some crazy, amazing thing that happened to me. But I do think that Stanford athletes do have it all, in terms of like they get the best of both worlds. They get to compete for championships, and then on top of that, they're going to get the most amazing class experience. And I mean, that's really the selling point. And it's not like really a 4-year decision. It's a lifetime decision, sort of thing. And it's really like, I want to be around people who are great because I don't have it all, because I want to be around the people that have the tools that I don't have so that I can add more to my toolbox, And so I think that it's really like, if I like, there's like kind of like this saying, like, you're the sum of the 5 people you hang around,
Absolutely.
And so, like, for me, like, I was around Haley Jones. I was around Cameron Brink. I was around, like, Carly Samuelson. I was around Erica McCall. Like, the best leader. Like, my freshman year, I had the best leaders, right? And so like, I knew when I was going to be in the position of leading, when I was a 3-year captain, like I wanted to be the person who had great relationships with every single person. You know, I wasn't perfect, you know, and there was times during practice where I probably got in someone's face and they probably didn't like it. But in the long run, like I had great relationships with every single person. And I really like cared about those things. And I loved growing those relationships as much as possible. And a lot of that comes from people seeing the way that you live too. Like I don't feel like I really walked around like I had it all, but you know, some people kind of have a perception of me just from, you know, seeing stuff that they don't really know about too. So it's kind of like, you know, that sort of thing really comes from having conversations with people and people being willing to have conversations with you too. Because that's really a two-way street. So I think for me is like not having judgments for other people and people not having judgments of me, and us getting to learn each other and that sort of thing. So yeah.
Yeah, I think the quote about the sum of the 5 people you're around the most, like I've seen that in my life and like through seasons, just when you feel like you're kind of in a slump and then you look at who you've been around the most and you're like, well, no, and you know what? Like, look who I've been hanging out with. And then on the other hand, when you're like, you know, you're feeling really good and you're like, these are kind of my people. I love that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And to go kind of back to like Stanford and the schooling, so correct me if I'm wrong, your mother was a nurse, your father was a lawyer, your dad played at Dartmouth, your grandma was a college professor, your uncle went to Harvard Law. So like your family is obviously extremely educated. That's something they take seriously. You talked about Richard Sherman and Baldwin pushing you towards Stanford. Did that also have come from your family at all?
Yeah, I mean, I would say my family is pretty like oddly successful, but I don't think that we're elitist. If that makes any sense, like we're not about like, or at least I know I'm not about elitism whatsoever. Like I honestly am so far away from that. But I mean, I ended up doing art at Stanford, so like, you know, it's kind of like,
yeah, exactly.
I mean, I did art at Stanford because honestly, it's one of the only undergrads, like art undergrads, where you get all of your tools for free. And like, I had a studio that was absolutely free. And like, I wasn't really sure if I'd ever do anything like that ever again in my life, where it was like someone's going to pay for me to have a studio space and like take photos all day and like paint before I go to practice and like that sort of thing. And I think that it was like really like, for me, I really just wanted to follow things that I was really passionate about. And I think that's what a lot of my family has done. And that's why, like, you know, we've kind of gotten to do really cool things, and all of us in our respective areas of life. But yeah, my grandfather, he was the president at Norfolk State University. My dad was a lawyer. Yeah, my uncle just like, he just got an honorary doctorate from Dartmouth for like being like one of the dopest like Black lawyers ever. Like that's probably not why he got that award, but like,
but also like maybe
like the dude is like legit and he's so dope. But his wife is like way smarter. She went to Harvard Law. She was like one of the first like Black women to graduate from Harvard Law.
Oh, that's
and
right.
Yeah, she's unreal. She used to like do all of my, not do my papers, but like edit all of my papers for college and stuff. She wrote my helped me write my college admission letter getting to Stanford. So yeah, I mean, my family is just like, everyone's great at something, and you know, it's just really cool to kind of just learn from everyone else in my family. So yeah. But in terms of going to Stanford, I mean, my family was definitely like, yeah, you should do it, because my uncle and my aunt, everyone in my family who went to Harvard or had experienced some sort of like version of Harvard, they always wish they had gone to Stanford, because it's not the same. Like Harvard is like this.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, where Stanford's like this.
Yeah.
Stanford is like a collaborative like hub where like people want to learn from each other. Like classrooms are not like
right. Right.
You know, it's very like, oh my gosh, like everyone's wearing like flip-flops. Like I'm literally wearing like slides right now. Like everyone comes in on like a longboard and like scooter or something like that. Like I had an electric longboard in college. And so like, it's really like chill, laid back. I mean, it's difficult. You have some hard classes and stuff, but for the most part, your professors want you to succeed and everything. So It's a really amazing experience. So yeah.
I watched Bridgerton. Like, I love Bridgerton. And so, like, the picture of, like, you in the studio is like putting me, like, with, like, King George and his, like, you know, like, his so Anna, why, like, what is it? See if you can get deep here. What is it about art that, like, has made it your passion, that has made it, like, the thing to you? I know it's, like, not just, like, painting, drawing. It's also, like, your fashion through social media. Like, what do you think it is about art that is attractive to you?
Well, the real story is I was in high school and I started picking up photography. Just like I had a little camera. I picked up photography, and then I got my concussion and I was having a really hard time with memory. So I was taking pictures of a bunch of different things. And then I was in like a cell phone photography class, which sounds like super fake. It sounds like one of those like electives that you just take like just to go away. I was in this class and I was actually struggling because I like couldn't see like normal because I had the eye tracking issue that I was talking about earlier. But my teacher was saying that like how I should pick up photography like as a more serious thing from the images I was taking. And I was like, nah, I can't do I can't go to Stanford and like do art. Like I can't. I went to a prep school and I was like, I loved environmental science. I love the environment. I love nature, all that sort of thing, all those sorts of things. And then my point guard coach, her name is Kate Pay. She went to Stanford. Like her whole family went to Stanford. Her brother was a football player. She was a walk-on on the women's basketball team, won a national championship. She literally did everything, went to law school and business school at the same time, played in the NBA all at the same time. So like this woman has been to Stanford and like knows the ins and outs of it. And so
we need her on the pod, Z.
Yeah.
We were in an academic meeting and I was sitting there and I was pretty upset. I was in my freshman season and I was just like so sad because I wasn't playing. And so my affect during the meeting, I think was like this. Like I was like, because I didn't really like what I was doing in school and like I didn't really like enjoy anything at the time because I was struggling so much with not playing. She was like, Anna, what is something that you really love? Like, what's the class like you've enjoyed so much right now? And I was like, oh, well, my cell-phone photography class. She was like, what? And I was like, yeah, photography. Like, I love it. And I was like, it's actually been really helping me with my memory. And she was like, well, like, why don't you take more classes in that? And so I ended up taking more photography classes. I ended up getting a DLSR, so like a really professional camera. I had a Canon 5D. Now I have a Canon 5D. I have like a Leica and like all these really cool like European cameras, German cameras. And then I was taking a film class, which is my favorite class. I would spend like outside of basketball, I literally spent all of my time in the dark room, like just in there messing around with like all the chemicals and all the paper and all that stuff. And then I started taking pictures of my teammates. And so it was really like a way for me to have conversation with people. And it allowed me to engage with people where I couldn't before. It also allowed me to remember things that I couldn't remember anymore. And it was my escape from basketball. It gave me a pastime where I felt like I was still giving so much work, like so much effort to it, similar to basketball, way different. But it was very similar to like how basketball allowed me to have a bigger perspective on life. And so I love photography because I think it's just a version of expression, you know. I took other art, I took other mediums and stuff, but I did sculpture, painting. I dabbled in drawing. I'm not a drawer at all. I can paint because I don't like lines don't have to be exact and like, you know, I'm not erasing, you know, stuff. I can just, you know, paint right over it or something. But so yeah, I mean, sculpture was probably my second favorite medium, just because it was very physical. But other than that, like, I mean, I guess art is like, it's also just really cool because like a lot of other athletes didn't feel like they could do art because it was like a complete different thing than like the sports world. It's like,
yeah,
it's a little bit softer. It's like more intimate. It's more like, you know, so it allowed me to kind of express myself in ways where I couldn't at the time because of basketball, you know?
Yeah.
So
that's awesome.
I think that, sorry, Z, I know that one of my favorite things about this podcast, but also just like in general, is talking to people who are so like multidimensional. Like I think like multidimensional people are the coolest people to have relationships with, to learn from, like all of the above. And like that's all I'm hearing right now is like you have so much more outside of like when you were a basketball player. Like there were so many more things about you that made you interesting. So I think that's pretty cool as well.
Thank you.
Yeah. That's literally what I was going to say. So I'm glad you said that. So now we've kind of talked about Stanford a lot, and I just have one more question. I can tell that you're like pretty loyal, a loyal person, and I can get that from you, and you care about relationships. And one thing that's really interesting to me is like when people that like don't really know like sports that well, or basketball for one, think about like the greatest basketball coaches. It's like Coach K, Gino, Pat Summitt. People like recency bias might throw Kim Mulkey in there, but like Tara VanDerveer is like, she's like her, like she's the girl. And I was watching this video today, and it was like when she passed Pat Summitt, and there was like all these people in this video congratulating her. It was like Steve Kerr, Condoleezza Rice, Lisa Leslie, like Billie Jean King, like all these people. And I'm like, dang, she must be like super impactful. Yeah. And so kind of talk about the impact she's had on you, and you played for her for 6 years. Like that's an extensive time to be around someone.
Yeah. I stayed around Stanford for so long because of the people, I knew that I had a really finite time. Like that was only 6 years of my life. I have so much more life to live. So like, obviously when I talk about 6 years, I'm like, dang, that was a long time and I'm really old. But at the same time, it felt like 2 days. Like now that I'm looking back on it, it felt so short. And so, I really stayed there because my teammates were incredible, great people. My favorite 15 people to see every day, sort of thing. And I miss them so much. Like now that I rarely see them with traveling so much. But, I think that playing for Tara was one of the most difficult things I've ever done in my entire life. Like I lost my dad when I was 12. I think maybe playing for Tara might be like right there in terms of like how difficult it is to play for someone, and like to be like for me to learn at 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, how to be a consistent person when you have like, I was talking to one of my other coaches the other day, and we were talking about how we always change. She's always the same person. She's always like getting older, and we're always the same age. Like these people that are playing for her are always the same age. So she always constantly has to adjust to like the nuances of this group, of this team. Right. And so that's a challenge for her, And so I think that it was like over the years, I kept getting closer and closer to her because I was just getting older, meaning like, I was surpassing what the normal group of people's age are, which finishes at probably 22, 23. And I was at 24, almost 25 years old playing for Tara. And so I think for me, like playing for Tara is not easy. If you've seen any documentary on her recently, like, with the Olympic team, I think they called her Lucy, And so like, she's not easy to play for at any level, whether you're Olympian or a college athlete or a freshman, whether you're a senior, freshman, junior, sophomore, like whatever. She's a challenging person to play for. And, I credit a lot of my fortitude and a lot of my resiliency and ability to like bounce back from difficult situations to her. There were some games where she was like, Anna, girl, like you're my dog, and then other games where it's kind of like silent too. So I think like kind of the ebbs and flows, I really learned a lot in terms of like handling stuff like that. I've won a lot of games with her, won more than lost, and won a lot more than probably a lot of other individuals won in college. And so, I don't know. I think that over time, like she got cooler too. And like from my freshman year to my senior year, Tara's a completely different individual. Like we used to run lines all day. Like there was one time she like miscounted our lines, and just we were running lines for no reason. even though that had nothing to do with the punishment. And then like my 5th year, 6th year, we didn't run our conditioning test whatsoever. Like we just don't, we don't do a
That's how
conditioning
it goes, dude. Everyone's everyone thinks it was harder when they did it.
Yeah.
Literally, post-COVID, it was like all of like the conditioning tests just went down the drain. They're like,
Yeah.
They're like, what? We don't even need this. Like if people were doing this when they like literally couldn't like breathe properly, like I don't think we need to do it. Like, yeah, we won a national championship without needing to like lift as much and also like running as much. And so I think that Tara just figured out like there's a formula, like no conditioning test, win a national championship. They're like correlated. And so they just don't run conditioning tests anymore. And so it's just she grows, over time, and I grew over time too. And so our relationship is like, it's definitely a coach player relationship. She's not trying to be your best friend. And that's worked for her for so long. So yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, they were talking. Which I respect the heck out of her too for being like keeping those boundaries too. Because I think it's almost more frustrating when a coach tends to go the other way, where they cross that boundary into like friendship player relationship. Then that becomes like a bigger problem than if it's just like strictly, coach player. But with that being said, like I feel like with how much time we spend with our college coaches, in a way they become like parent figures for us for those 4 years or those 6 years in your case, especially because college is like so transformational. It is transformational in like the way we think, the way we do things, all the above. But with that being said, your parents, I don't know your parents, but I sent you that video of your mom last night because I was like in tears watching that video of the new house. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I love her. I don't even know her. And your parents obviously raised like three phenomenal children. And you talked about being oddly successful, but like that doesn't just happen, and whenever people are successful, I truly believe like there's like some nature, but there's so much nurture in there. And so I know growing up for me, like I love my parents to death, and I'm one of 4 kids and all of us are going to play college sports too. So like, I think about like what they said to me, and growing up, my dad would always say like, do what others don't. That was like his thing. And Z, I say it all the time, but like, what was like a phrase that you remember your parents just preaching into you all, or what were some things that they were like, this is what's important, this is what's not important, that kind of guided you and your brothers to make the decisions you all made and get to where you all are at now?
Yeah, I would say probably Russell would probably say that my dad said more like kind of like one-liners, that sort of thing. My dad passed away when I was 12 years old, so I never really got to have those conversations with my dad at that time. And I probably also can't remember because I think when my dad started, like he was like kind of in the hospital in and out for like a few years, like I think like 3 or 4 years when I was 9. And so like my earliest memories with my dad were like playing basketball after dinner and that sort of thing, like playing one-on-one. Other than that, like I didn't really, my mom loves me and loves what I'm doing, whatever it is I'm doing. She loves it. Like wants to know what's going on, all that stuff. She's into it, that sort of thing. My mom absolutely knows nothing about basketball. Loves me, loves the team, knows nothing about basketball, knows nothing about football. She will be at Russell's games like screaming about something, and like the play probably hasn't even started yet. So my mom is very supportive. Yeah. I do think that something, that I probably gained a lot from my parents, honestly, was like a lot of independence. I was like, I kind of went through my college career, kind of like my freshman and sophomore year was like pretty tough. And, I relied on a lot of the things like coping mechanisms I learned when I was when I was like dealing with my dad being in the hospital and like my mom having to like be gone for work. So like I learned a lot of like depending on myself, like depending on my faith, like depending on my friends and like that sort of thing. And I know that like, my family's always there. for me and that sort of thing. But like at the same time, like I got through some of the stuff in college, like not by calling my mom and being like, oh my God, like this happened today in practice. I'm like so upset that it happened, like that sort of thing. And I just kind of like stuck with stuff and learned how to finish things from like start to end, you know, rather than like resting sort of in the middle or stopping kind of in the middle of things. So I think that that's probably like some of the things that I learned probably indirectly from my parents. My mom worked super, super hard, even though, you know, my dad was pretty much like on his deathbed for like in and out of, you know, out of time, you know, sort of thing. And so, you know, I think that that was probably the biggest thing that I took away from my parents. And, you know, me, Russell, and Harry had all different kinds of upbringings and stuff. And so that's probably why we all have different kinds of personalities and stuff. So yeah.
Our faith is like all of our own. Like we can't take our faith from our family, our friends, whatever. But your brother, Russell, is like kind of the face of faith in the NFL. Mm-hmm. And you also said that you were a leader in FCA. And earlier in the podcast, you said something, it comes from like my favorite scripture. You said like you boast in your weakness, and that's 1 Corinthians 12:9. And I just think that's really awesome. And so I kind of want to hear about your faith, and then also like boasting your weakness. You had a really tough couple first years of school. Like how did your faith kind of lead you through that?
Yeah. Well, yeah, my brother, like, you know, he's a really big believer. And he's a person that's very outspoken about his faith. You know, and I respect that a lot, especially with kind of his, you know, Russell's been pretty darn successful, like his entire life, like literally super successful. I remember being in the car and I'm gonna say I was in the back seat because I was pretty young and I probably shouldn't have been in the front seat. So I'm gonna say I can't really remember, but I do remember him saying in the car, he's like, one day I'm gonna make millions of dollars. Like, and I don't just mean like I'm gonna make some money. He's like, I'm gonna make a lot of money. Like, you know, and I think that he's a person that's always spoke things like out in his life, you know, and so you know, I really respect his like consistency in his faith. However it looks, you know, he's very consistent in his faith. Whether he's super like winning Super Bowls, you know, in his first few years of the NFL, whether he kind of got that starting spot over Matt Flynn, you know, that sort of situation, kind of being a 3rd round pick, being super short, like everyone's like, no, you're not going to do this and that. Russell's literally defied the odds every single time, you know, and like, I think he's someone that a lot of people, like I was watching this, this is kind of going all over the place, but I was watching this Kanye West documentary and it was talking about kind of like they hate you when you become great, you know, sort of thing. I think Russell's one of those people that people constantly have something to say because he's someone that's so consistent. And so you try and find like these little things about people that you don't like, or these things that like, you know, they struggle with, or they aren't doing that great in this area, so that you can like magnify, you know, things that aren't that great about them, you know? And so I think for me, seeing someone that consistent in a world where it's like instant gratification or social media and all that stuff, like, I think that's been huge for me in terms of like staying on my own path. I think we both have like very different paths and very different personalities and ways that we want to live our lives. But I think that he's a person that has such strong faith, and, you know, I respect that so much, you know. He's definitely has an alpha personality and all of these things, but he's a person of very strong faith and very committed to anything that he's doing. He wants to be great at, and so I think his faith is also a testament to that too.
So cool. And I have, when you were talking, Z knows this story, but I have a mentor at school who talks about like manifestation isn't really the term Christians use to talk about like speaking their dreams and goals into existence. You know, that's not really the term we use, but he phrased it so well for me. He was like, you know, he's a father, and he's like, if my 16-year-old son came to me and was like, Dad, I want to buy a Tesla. And if you're the dad, you're like, son, like, I want you to have that Tesla, but I'm not just going to give it to you. Like, you need to be putting the work in day out, day in, day out. But then his name's Quint. He's like, at the end of it, when my son turns 16, like, I'm going to be working my butt off to make sure he gets that Tesla. And that's like what God does for us. Like, when we have these crazy dreams, like, I'm sure Russell had crazy dreams back then and still does now. And like, if you are doing the same things day in and day out, like, those things, I think we all believe, like, will happen. Maybe not exactly how we think they will, but like, I don't know. I liked that analogy. And I think that, like, Russell's like probably a testament of that as well.
Yeah. I think it's someone that's like, if you're good at something, let's just say you're good. If you're good at something, you put in all of the work and you're a good person, things are going to work out. Like, it's almost like, and when I say work out, they work out exactly how God has planned them to work out, and that is the best way of it coming to whatever life that it comes to. That's the best way that it comes, is because, like, I mean, I don't know that many people who are great at something, good at something. They put in all of the work. They have the faith. They do everything right, that it doesn't work out. Like, it's very rare to me that doesn't happen. It's happened for myself, but I think that for Russell, he has like favor over his life, of course this year is kind of like, didn't, go the way things planned, but that's how it looks to us, that it didn't go as planned, like almost some of the stuff is like, it went so south that it's like, literally, for it to go north, it's like only God could have done that.
Right.
It takes the attention, it puts it back on God to see how this thing unfolds and everything.
Right.
Because he's put in all the work, he's done everything right. So it's just like, it's got to be kind of one of those stories where it's like only God could have done it. And so, like, I'm excited to see where things go. I think that he's made a lot of changes. He's made a lot of improvements and stuff. People on the outside are always going to have something to say, but it really doesn't matter what anyone has to say at the end of the day. So, I mean, ultimately, he's still like one of the best quarterbacks in the league. He's still playing in the NFL. He's one of the 32 quarterbacks who have the job of starting. Crazy. So everyone can say everything, but like, he's the one in the position. So it doesn't really matter what everyone else has to say.
I gotta say really quickly, and Brez can attest to this, my brother is like the biggest Seahawks fan. His bedspread, my brother's name is Chancellor, so he has Cam Chancellor's jersey, he has your brother's jersey, he's got Seahawks flags everywhere. Like, when it was like that group on the Seahawks, my brother like fell in love, and so he's gonna love this. But that was really awesome, and I want to say I didn't mean to make that all about your brother, but it was really awesome hearing you talk about him in that light. So
it's one of those things. My brother wins, I win. When I win, he wins. So I think ultimately for me, and when he loses, I feel the loss too. This season, I think, unfortunately, that was probably the most losses that either one of us has experienced in one season, like, ever.
Yeah.
And so, I think that's part of life. I have definitely had my down seasons, and this is probably one of his first ones. And he's been playing for a very, very long time. He's been playing for a very, very long time. This is his first down season. I mean, and maybe like, even if it's not his first, if it's his second, like it's not that big of a deal. So it's just like things that you got to work through and get through. So, yeah.
First of all, Anna, I don't think I told you this, but I'm from Wisconsin. And so, like, when I told a few people, I was like, yeah, I have a girl named Anna Wilson. I was like, actually, she's Russell Wilson's sister, too. They, like, how, did you go to a Camp Randall game?
Oh, my God. Yeah. Jump around. Like,
yeah.
It was crazy.
People are freaking crazy up here, like, in the best way possible. So, like, everyone loves Russell Wilson up here. So, you know that, too. With that being said, though, like, obviously, we took a little time to talk about him. And like, Harry was insanely successful as well. being the youngest, so I'm the oldest of four. And my brother plays college basketball. My sister plays college volleyball. And my youngest sister right now, she's going to be a junior, and she's just going through the recruiting process now. And it's like she's in a similar position as you in terms of like she has 3 older siblings who have all kind of created paths for themselves that like have turned out to be pretty successful. And I think it's like it's been really good for her because she's like going to be the best athlete out of all of us because she's like lived in the gym. Yeah. But at the same time, like it's also really hard because she's like, Mom, Dad, I want to make my own way. Like I don't want to go to Kentucky. I don't want to go to Marquette. Like I don't want to be Maddie's little sister. I don't want to be Molly's little sister. So how have you kind of like tiptoed on that line of like, I want to be Anna, but like I also love my siblings more than life itself. Walk us through that, like that a little bit.
Yeah, I think I mentioned earlier, like you're the sum of the people you're around, right? And like the toolbox thing, like I have tools in my toolbox that I got from Russ and I got from Harry, you know? And I think that for me, like carving out my own path is like one of my main focuses in what I'm doing in life. Yeah. Like I've lived in a shadow of Russell my entire life in the sense of like him being brought up in most things that, you know, I do. Right. But I think that that's also a gift because it's allowed me avenues that I probably would not have if I didn't have my siblings or if he wasn't that successful. And there's this whole thing in the Bible, glory to glory, you know, that sort of thing. And like, I really believe that like my siblings are like glory to glory to glory, you know, and like they've given me things and given me tools that like I really like without them, I wouldn't be able to navigate things so quickly as a young person without them. You know, they've like, I've seen them go through things. I see, like I'm in therapy right now. And one of the things, like I had to do this drawing for my therapist the other day. And I drew this one like stair and I drew like a ladder, like an ascension line. And I drew a question mark and I was like, I'm not really sure if I'm going to climb that ladder or like be in the same spotlight that Russell's in, because I'm still trying to figure out like what it is that I want in my life. And do I want to be that successful, or does success to me even look like what Russell has, or like, is that what success like means to me? You know, so I'm still trying to figure out things in my own life, like what makes me happy, what is something I'm passionate about, what is going to like fuel my like car or whatever, you know, that sort of thing, you know, what's going to bring me life and energy and abundance. And that's not going to look like the things that bring Russell the same energy and abundance. Russell's very much a doer. He likes to do things all the time. I am like an expert in rest. Like I literally, I am so like, I don't mean like I like to sleep in. I actually hate sleeping in. I just mean that I am so much like into reading. I love going to therapy. I love connection. I love people. I love connecting. Like I love all of those things. I'm very adamant about like, I love doing work, but I want to do it in the way that I've always have done work. Like, so I work remote hybrid. Like I fly into the city. I go into the city for like a really short period of time. And then I leave. I go back home and I work from home. I work in a very like eclectic space and like, you know, I do my own thing. I don't try and be him. I don't try and have his success. You know, I try and be Anna. And then a lot of times like I get really cool opportunities because I have really great siblings who open doors for me as well. So, you know, I won't say it's a family affair. Like I'm not really like that sort of thing, but I do like the idea of like, you know, the people around you who God has put in your life, like help you and like we help each other, and build off of each other and that sort of thing. And, so yeah, I just try and be me.
Love that.
And it took me a while to get to that point. So yeah,
I'm sure. Wow. I'm inspired by that response. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, same.
Really.
This is like off topic, but like my favorite thing about doing this is like hearing like a lot of people say the same things, but hearing them say it in different ways and like how like people, do you know what I'm saying, Maddie? Like,
yeah,
the way different people think about things and like process it and say it out loud is like really cool to hear. And that's lowballing what you just said, but that's really awesome.
Z, and I also think that like being siblings that have younger siblings and like seeing how Anna views it from a younger sibling is cool because like we're the Russell to our younger siblings, which I think is like it's like a responsibility, but it's also like it's a now you have family affair in my head, but like we help like mutually help each other too. So yeah.
I'm definitely the black sheep of my family. Like what I mean by that is I'm the one that's like pretty unpredictable. You know, like I've done like really cool things at a really young age, and I've done stuff that's like a little bit more like creative at a younger age. Then my brother's like when I was in college and I was playing sports, like I didn't play 2 sports in college. I only played 1. I wish I had played 2. I should have played 2. And I worked when I was in college. I worked at a gallery when I was in college. Obviously I did art. I think my brothers did like English, and like my oldest brother, he did English in college. He's a phenomenal writer.
Cool.
And then Russell did like some sort of like business or like management communication sorts of thing. And then I did art. Like I painted like before going to like practice, and like had paint on my nose and stuff. And like, you know, I'm just different. And like, you know, I think my family appreciates the differences that I have. Like, and I think that we all try and like, we don't try and like do things like necessarily like, it just kind of happens naturally, I think. And so, I don't know. I just think that my family has like so many different like things going on, and like, it's kind of like, it's just interesting. So, yeah.
That's awesome. Okay, Anna, we have one more question for you. The biggest one of them all. There's hopefully going to be a lot of people listening to this, and they're going to benefit a lot from it. But what is your best piece of advice that you could give everyone listening right now? All the women listening.
All the women listening.
Women.
Well, I mentioned earlier that I'm going to therapy right now. And I would say I would say, okay, go ahead.
No, you go first, and then we'll go.
Okay, I'll go first. So my advice, when I was in college, I had all of the tools to get therapy. You know, and I had literally, like, Stanford has so many tools in order to get therapy. And I did like performance therapy, but like my things that I needed weren't really about my performance. They were like things outside of my sport, you know? Like when I started doing art, I got better at basketball because I was doing something that I was passionate about and something that like allowed me to take my mind off of the sport. But, you know, like, you know, I started doing therapy, like I've kind of met with different people. I finally found my person like, to do therapy with. And I think it's one of those things where like learning and like figuring out what's going on the inside is like so important. And I was reading this book. I was traveling around and I went to this bookstore and I found this book, and then like it has like a little blurb, and it talked about like, this is the best book you'll ever read about Jesus. So I picked it up and I was like, okay, I'm gonna read this book. And like it talked about the false self, and then it also talked about just like getting to know yourself, because the more you get to know yourself, the more you get to know Jesus, sort of thing. And I think that one of those things is like understanding who I am, you know, especially with the social media world, and especially for women. Like in the world of social media, we get so much validation, we get so much affirmation, we get almost an information overload on like who we should be, how we should be in relationships, how we should be like in whatever spheres of the world that we're in, you know. And it's really like, who am I? What matters to me? Like, am I doing this? I just thought of a J. Cole line, but like, am I doing this? Am I doing this for, if it's like to facilitate growth, or am I doing this to be famous? Like that's sort of like J. Cole line, right? But like, am I doing this to like get personal growth out of the situation, or am I doing this to like, am I posting this on social media for other people? You know, that sort of thing. I was talking to my therapist about depth over width, right? We think about width being like this and depth being like this. Like I'm a very substance person. And so like, if it's not this way and it's more like this, I don't want this at all. I want this. I want depth. I want relationships that have depth. Like I want to be doing work that requires depth and like creativity and like figuring out like, what am I creating? What am I putting out into the world? What energy am I giving? What energy am I getting back? Like, is there reciprocation? All of those things. And so like, I think to me, in the world that we live in, with instant gratification, with liking, with commenting, with all this stuff, like all of that stuff is stuff that involves like being impressive and being what other people want us to be, instead of like, this is who I am, this is what I want. And I don't know, I would say like get greedy with like knowing yourself and like spending time with yourself, especially like when you're an athlete, because when you leave the sport that you dedicate your entire life to and you're detached from that thing, I mean, some people will still play professionally, but you'll figure out who you are. And it has to be something so much more than the person you are in your sport, because when you're not playing it anymore, you're not around the same 15 people, 12 people, 24 people. It's different, and luckily I've had the tools, since a really young person, to search for those things. So that's my advice.
Get greedy. I just wrote that down. Get greedy.
I did too. So did I literally wrote that down.
Well, all I was going to say is about what you said is the reason we were laughing is Z and I were having that exact conversation last night. Like, you literally took the words out of our mouth. We were talking about therapy and like really like how much of a difference it can make in people's lives. So when you started saying that, that's why we both started laughing, because we're like, what are the odds of that? Like her bringing this up and we had just started talking about it.
Yeah.
I'm surprised you didn't make fun of me, because I told Anna that you were going to make fun of me. So
no, I won't make fun of you, but not on this. But as soon as we're done recording, I probably will.
So fun.
Oh, Anna, this has been seriously like just the biggest blessing. Like I said, we love talking to people who, I said the multidimensional thing, but I think the depth thing that you mentioned is something that is like really going to stick with me. And I'm probably going to go tell my boyfriend too, because I'm talking to him about, that was like the perfect like verbiage for what I'm trying to say. I'm like, Nick, I want like depth, like rather than width. So I'll be taking that. I like that a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't like, I was talking about that in therapy, and we weren't talking about the submarine situation, but when you obviously when you look at the ocean, you're looking at the surface of things, and there's so much undiscovered, like when you think about the ocean and how deep it is, like literally that thing is so deep, so wide, right? But when you think about the depth of it, there's so much of that hasn't been discovered. And just like, that's the same thing with like people too. You see a lot on the surface, like you see social media, you have a perception of me, you read some article, I'm really like, there's accolades and stuff, but there's so much like in between. There's things that are required, and prerequisites and stuff that are required in order to get to those accolades and stuff. And so, and even like, I don't really believe in failure too much, but I just think that there's so much to depth that is like, man, that thing is like driving I want that to drive every single thing that I do. And so if it doesn't have depth, like I'm not a part of it. So yeah.
So cool.
That's awesome.
So cool.
What an episode. Thank you, Anna. Thank you so much for joining us. Kind of was hectic getting you on, but I'm glad it worked out. So.